I'd like to hand over to my colleague Laura Musikanski, who is going to moderate the first session. Thanks, Laura.
Beautiful, Paul. Thank you. So happy International Day of Happiness. And I hope that each and all of you will come away from this time together that we have with real hope for the future, with real optimism for the future, and with real inspiration. So I've been leading a project called the Happiness Alliance since 2010, and it was in 2012 when myself and Paul were both invited members. That's kind of special that we were invited members by the Bhutan's Prime Minister Thinley to the 2012 high-level meeting that Paul mentioned. That meeting was also convened by the United Nations, and it essentially launched the happiness movement. What is the happiness movement, and what is International Day of Happiness really about? If you read resolution 66/281, you will see that it's not about something silly about dancing. Of course, those are important, but what it's about, and I'm going to quote this: recognizing the need for a more inclusive, equitable, and balanced approach to economic growth that promotes sustainable development, poverty eradication, happiness, and the well-being of all peoples. So in this first session, you're going to learn a little bit about what the happiness movement is about. I'm going to put here, you see that you're going to hear from Luis. He's going to be our last speaker. And with him, I'll start with him, you're going to get an experience of what happiness means. He's been doing wonderful work bringing the experience of happiness to people through the organization that he leads today, which he'll tell you about, and also collaterally through an organization he started called Wohasu. Your first speaker is going to be Nancy Haye. It's going to be on video, and she's going to talk about what they're doing in the United Kingdom. Now, we all know that Bhutan started the happiness movement with gross national happiness. The United Kingdom has done great strides. They've done wonderful work. And What Works for Wellbeing, founded in 2015, is doing amazing work. I'm not going to tell you more about it because Nancy will tell you about it. Then you're going to hear from John Hall. John Hall, in 2002, he created the measures of Australia's progress, essentially their sustainability indicators in 2002. Later, he worked with Giovannini to create the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's Better Life Index. And now he's working at the United Nations Development Program, and he heads up the reports, the section that looks at the reports and helps countries with their reports on how they're doing with the Sustainable Development Goals measured by the Sustainable Development Indicators. He'll give you a little bit dour at the beginning, but let's just wait for the end. Wait for what he says at the end. Then you'll hear from Maksim Soshkin, who you know better, because what I didn't mention this, but I think it's important to note that Paul, I started working with Paul about 3 years ago, and Paul had the amazing idea of bringing the happiness movement to the tourism sector, and we really have to take our hats off to Paul. And I've had great joy in working with Paul, and now our fabulous team. You can see our placards on our profiles here. So Maksim will talk about, he's a policy analyst, and he'll talk about happiness and well-being within sort of the low-hanging fruit of the tourism industry. And then I already mentioned that we're going to end with Luis. So as Paul is queuing up, or Paul or Amanda from Planet Happiness are queuing up this first video from Nancy Haye of What Works for Wellbeing, where you're going to learn a little bit more about the happiness movement. I want to just go ahead and give you a definition of what the happiness movement is all about. This happiness movement represents a paradigm shift where the goal of governments, of economies, of societies, of our own personal lives, and of the tourism industry is as it should be, going beyond GDP and recognizing that economic growth and financial well-being is just one part of the many factors that make us happy and that bring us well-being, so that the goal of all of our systems is our well-being. So if you could go ahead, let's see, we had it queued up and then it unqueued. If you could queue up that first video from Nancy Haye, that would be great, Paul.
Hello, I'm Nancy Haye. I'm the Executive Director at the What Works Centre of Wellbeing, and it's brilliant to be with you here today. I run a collaborating centre working out what communities, businesses, governments can do to improve wellbeing with leading academics and practitioners around the world. And what are we thinking about when we're thinking about wellbeing? For me, it's about thinking about what is success. And today we're using the words, well-being, happiness, quality of life interchangeably to work out what it is it means, or the idea of societal progress and of creating the conditions for people to live better lives, to live a good life, to live a brighter future. Well-being is understanding, really simply, is understanding how we're doing as individuals, communities, and as a nation, and how sustainable that is for the future. And how do we know when we're improving lives? Well, we ask, and we ask, how are you doing? And because you can't always tell from the outside what's going on. And you can see that when we speak to people about what matters to them in life, they tell us that what helps them thrive is when they're feeling safe, feeling loved and fulfilled, feeling comfortable, have good enough jobs and money, access to a good quality food. And then they're feeling loved and respected and appreciated and fulfilled, able to make a difference in this world. You can see that we're measuring well-being globally, and well-being, it's going beyond this idea of just removing the ills in our life, the absence of illness, but actually actively creating social well-being. And we can see that that means focusing on a broader range of outcomes than you might traditionally. Yes, GDP, yes, life expectancy, but also how those and other things in our life make a contribution to us living a good life and a better life. It's focusing on outcomes that matter to people. What difference did it make to them? How did they feel about it? And those outcomes are often aspirational. So as goals in the Sustainable Development Goals, and here in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act in Wales, which includes the new one of sort of the vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language. This idea of having shared goals as a community or an organisation or a society helps us focus shared activity and this idea towards a positive version of progress. And these broader measures means introducing frameworks or dashboards that bring things all together overall. So economic, social and environmental all together in sort of nationally as a full version of our national accounts. It means using objective and subjective measures together. So crime rates and income, as well as, do I feel safe alone at night? Do I feel better off? And this mix leads us to much more sustainable problem solving for the things that make a difference in our lives. And it also means valuing and building this thing called capitals and investing in things for the future. So natural, economic, human and social capital to create intergenerational well-being in a sustainable way. And what does that mean for what we do? I run the What Works Centre for Wellbeing. It's UK's national body for wellbeing evidence, policy and practice. We're an independent collaborative organisation, and we bring together the knowledge around the world for organisations to use to improve lives. So when we heard people talking about well-being in their communities and in their culture, that travel and new experiences came up consistently as really strong and joyous part of our conversation, of learning about others, of building empathy and connection. And we know that tourism can improve well-being of tourists and of the local communities in both the short and long term, providing jobs and incomes and belonging and pride, and supporting communities and protecting meaningful, intangible cultural assets. We know that how we spend our time matters for well-being, and experiences that improve our well-being include ones that are happy, meaningful, create shared interest, about learning and exploring and creating, about being active and getting into the natural environment for solitude, or with family and friends, making memories and building connections. And so we can see that many places now are having wellbeing frameworks, or organisations are having wellbeing frameworks, a wide set of measures telling us how we're doing. And these can be used to understand the full impact that we're having, so that we can do it better and more consistently, spot gaps where we're not doing as well as we'd like, or looking out for harms and making sure people are feeling safe across the system, both now and in the future. And it can help us understand what can help create resilience and support the intergenerational well-being of both individuals and communities. And this means understanding impacts on prosperity, on jobs, of livelihoods, on the places that we live in, and our communities around them, so our social impacts and our environmental impacts together, and as well as the difference you make for the lives of your visitors. How do you know the difference you're making in people's lives? Well, you ask. And here at the What Works Centre for Wellbeing, we listen. We want to understand your learning. We want to see your evaluations, your data analysis, so we can make a proper learning system of global knowledge towards social progress. It's been brilliant to be with you today. I'm Nancy Haye at the What Works Centre for Wellbeing. Enjoy the rest of the session.
So now we're going to queue up our next video, which is by John Hall. But hopefully with that one, you got a kind of an idea of what we mean by well-being, that it really is holistic and that we're looking at many facts as Bhutan does with their Gross National Happiness Index. Here comes John Hall. It's going to be a little dour at the beginning. He's a statistician, but it's going to get good at the end.
My name is John Hall. I'm from the United Nations Development Programme, and I'll just speak briefly about some of the ways I see happiness is important to development work more generally. Last year was a dire year for the planet. I think it's all too obvious that the Earth's warning signals are flashing red. Wildfires in Australia, of course, in California, in the Pantanal in Brazil, even in Siberia, record-breaking hurricanes in the Atlantic, and of course, a continuing collapse of the world's biodiversity with some 70% of wildlife lost in the last 50 years. Humanity is at war with nature, and this is a war we can never win. Of course, COVID-19 has been a very clear warning of what has come and what will continue to come from our ever-tightening grip on nature. COVID-19 has been a development crisis, unprecedented. And of course, there have been terrible health impacts around the world, but also impacts on so much more things that matter about development. Inequality in particular, in many forms. Many of those already worse off in the world have been hit hardest by COVID. They've lost their chance to go to school, to work, to earn income, and so much more. So the crisis has driven a wedge into existing inequalities and pushed them apart. And yet, despite a year of turmoil that we've had from this pandemic, the data shows that happiness has been extraordinarily resilient over the past year. Even though many of the things that our happiness depends on, the pillars that support it, have been hit so hard, the data also suggests that some of the aspects of life which we know are very important to happiness, things like whether we trust our government and institutions and whether we trust each other, these have also been critical in how countries have been able to respond to COVID-19. Because if you're in a society where you don't trust your government to do the right thing, people are much less likely to follow policies on things like social distancing or lockdowns or mask wearing. And of course, we've seen that right around the world in how countries have dealt or not dealt with the pandemic. And this shows, I think, once again, that while pursuing happiness for any society is important in its own right, pursuing happiness is also important for a great many other reasons. Here at UNDP, when we talk about well-being, our focus is really on human development, which is essentially empowering people everywhere with the freedom and the opportunity to live the best lives they can. And the data shows reassuringly that human development is very strongly correlated with happiness at the national level. And that's what we'd hope, of course, because if we development professionals think we're raising development, but happiness isn't changing, then are we truly raising development? The two areas generally go hand in hand. Here at the UN, the last Human Development Report, which came out in December 2020, was on the Anthropocene, the age of humans, the age in which humans have become the dominant force shaping the planet. We recognize that development cannot come at the expense of the planet. COVID-19 has shown the perils of that. For too long, debates about development have been framed as a choice between saving people or saving the planet. But we can't do one without the other, because planetary and social imbalances interact. Inequality in a society can lead to environmental degradation, and environmental degradation can lead to more inequality. And these social imbalances can also make it much harder to find the solutions we need if we're to tackle environmental problems. And just ask any government that has looked at introducing a carbon tax about those issues. So policies that promote happiness are often much gentler on the environment than those that promote economic growth. And as happiness also goes hand in hand with a more pro-social attitude in society, it can also mean that happier societies are more likely to cooperate to find the solutions we need to find if we're to reduce our greenhouse emissions, as well as many other environmental impacts. And so on International Happiness Day, I am more convinced than ever that governments should pursue the greatest happiness for the greatest number as an overarching goal. This is not only worthwhile end in itself, it is also one of the means to many other ends that are all vital for global development.
All right, beautiful. So I think you heard a little optimism there. So now we're going to hear from Maksim Soshkin, and here you're going to hear about essentially, I'd like you to think about what is the low-hanging fruit in the work that you're doing around bringing well-being into the conversation.
Hello, everyone. I would like to first thank Planet Happiness, the World Tourism Network, and the International Institute for Peace Through Tourism for putting together a webinar on such an important topic as happiness and well-being in tourism, and inviting myself and the forum to participate. My name is Maksim Soshkin, and I am the lead on the forum's Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report. To give you a little background on the World Economic Forum, it is the international organization for public-private cooperation with the stated goal of improving the state of the world. We bring leaders from business, government, civil society, and academia to advance positive change in areas ranging from climate change to global trade. Our aviation, travel, and tourism work revolves around bringing together sector stakeholders to make travel and tourism safe, clean, and inclusive. And well-being and quality of life are inherently part of the forum's and the travel and tourism team's mission. If properly managed, travel and tourism is a driver of economic and social development and connects communities and cultures all around the world. And people are happier when they're economically secure and are able to travel and experience new things. The devastation the COVID pandemic has caused to travel and tourism reinforces this idea. With well over 100 million travel and tourism-related jobs lost and entire countries under lockdown, there's a real crisis in well-being. How does all of this tie into our work? Well, quality of life and well-being are highly interconnected with sustainability. And as the tourism sector recovers, it's important that we make sustainability a priority. And not just for its own sake, because it's a matter of long-term competitiveness and resilience. And therefore, we need to account for it in the forum's Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report and Index. The TTCI measures a set of factors and policies that enable the sustainable development of travel and tourism sector, which in turn contributes to the development and competitiveness of a country. The index consists of 4 sub-indexes and 14 pillars, which score a country's business environment, international openness, infrastructure, and the richness of its natural and cultural resources, and more. The TTCI was developed to act as a strategic benchmarking tool for business and governments to develop the travel and tourism sector, highlight the interdependent nature of travel and tourism, and facilitate a multi-stakeholder dialogue about the topic. For the 2021 edition of the index, work is currently underway to make the index more representative of the link between sustainability and competitiveness. To give everyone a better understanding of the direction we're going in, quality infrastructure, pro-tourism business policies, and the richness of a destination's cultural and natural resources are all important for competitiveness. We continue to believe that. However, if you recall, before the pandemic, the boom in international tourism generated a multitude of challenges for destinations, including overcrowding, cultural and environmental degradation, infrastructure capacity constraints, and affordable housing shortages. Issues which will not go away in the post-COVID world. It got to the point that there were mass protests around the cities like Barcelona and Venice against tourism. For many, the industry's benefits were not outweighed by the cost to their quality of life and well-being. These issues also impact visitors. No one wants to go to places where they're not welcome, and as someone who likes to travel, I can attest there's nothing fun about visiting overcrowded sites. However, if factors like environmental sustainability, inclusivity, destination capacity to absorb tourism are taken into account, you can have continued long-term growth in tourism while minimizing risks and preserving assets, and not just natural and cultural resources, but the local community, whose well-being is fundamental for successful destinations. And with this, the sector can continue being the important tool for development and connectivity that it currently is.
Okay, that ends our recorded presentations for this section, and it begins with our first live presentation, which is Luis Guillardo, as he's being queued up to talk to you about how he's bringing the experience of happiness to people. and bringing modules for bringing happiness into organizations. I'm really excited for you to hear about this. I want to give another plug to Planet Happiness, and that this is an organization, the first organization that's bringing the happiness movement into tourism, this tourism sector. In the upcoming sessions, you're going to hear from wonderful people, including people who are deeply engaged with Planet Happiness, Jerry Spooner from Vanuatu, and Susan Farhead from the Goldfield. It's going to be, it's absolutely fantastic. I've been working in this field for over 10 years, well, longer than I want to say. And it's absolutely fantastic what Planet Happiness is doing. So let's go ahead and Luis.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Paul, and thank you to the World Trade Organization and everybody organizing this meeting. This is fantastic being here. I'm Luis Gallardo. I'm the founder of the World Happiness Foundation, and the World Happiness Fest actually happening right now for the whole week. So you are more than invited to join us today. We have the whole day activities, and we are going to celebrate International Day of Happiness, looking at suffering from multiple angles. And actually this is the suffering of the planet is definitely one of the topics that we are going to be exploring in this case tomorrow. But in this case, I want to focus my short talk on something that is very important as we keep focusing on processes, as we keep focusing on elements, on nations. I think that something that really resonates with me is how we improve and how we evolve by focusing on the human being. We cannot achieve fundamental peace if we are not at peace individually. So I think this is my call to action, and this is my key message today. We have to go beyond nations. We have to go beyond structures and processes. So I would actually like to share a short video where I explain what fundamental peace is. I don't know if you see my screen. Yeah, I was trying to, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Do you see my screen? Yeah. With this, I think this is very important that we as individuals and humans of this planet, we understand that we are always trying to achieve freedom. But freedom is really freedom to be who we are, to unleash our whole potential. And this is what I feel tourism really helps, and traveling, because when we go beyond our countries, when we go beyond our cities, we completely change perspective. So tourism really helps to achieve a lot of our freedom to be, especially when we have time to go inside. The second big element is consciousness. And this is the big part missing today in the world, consciousness to expand and evolve. And we are missing consciousness because it's very difficult, because most of it is below the degree of consciousness. We are mostly subconscious. We don't really know what's going on. And that's why traveling and tourism helps so much, because we have to go into ourselves in this case. So I think that freedom is achieved by being and we have to travel outside. Consciousness is achieved by going inside. And the combination is beautiful because we can have a journey into ourselves. We can have a journey to the world. And then the third big element, that is when you combine freedom with consciousness and you include happiness, you fundamentally change our human evolution, because happiness is not just important for us, it's important to share. Something that we've learned from all the research is that meaningful relationships are key to happiness, but happiness really, really means that we can expand, that we can evolve, that we can get connected to ourselves and we can connect to others, because we're emanating. Our radiance is going to change when we use happiness in order to expand and in order to evolve. So basically today, International Day of Happiness, I just want to celebrate with you. And I want to make this call to action that don't expect many things to change in the world if you don't change yourself. And I feel that we have to go beyond nations. I think nations is great for traveling. It's like, well, I'm going places. I was really looking forward to if we don't use the right way, that structure is gonna help. It's gonna become just a layer for our own beings, and we have to go deeper. So I invite you to travel to yourself and to combine freedom with consciousness and happiness. I'm sure that we all together we're gonna achieve a lot. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Laura, Paul, and I get it back to you.
Thank you, beautiful, Luis. So there's some resources there for how to get engaged with the work that Luis is doing, and I can tell you that people coming away from that work, they are often transformed, as we are transformed through travel, and as we hope that the rest of this meeting will transform you. So then we go on, Paul, I hand it back to you. Thank you so much to everybody.